The delivery. The battered freighter, Stellar Wind, shuddered as it maneuvered through the asteroid belt. Alex Mercer gripped the controls tightly, sweat dripping down his temple. His ship was old, practically ancient by interstellar standards, but he trusted it like an old friend. The cargo hold hummed faintly, reminding him of the valuable and very mysterious cargo he was transporting. "Come on, girl," Alex muttered to the ship. "Hold together just a little longer." The asteroid belt was unforgiving, a maze of spinning rocks and deadly debris. Even the best pilots avoided it unless absolutely necessary. But Alex didn't have a choice. He was late, and his client was not the kind to tolerate delays. A sudden alert blared through the cockpit. His heart sank as he glanced at the radar. 3 blips were closing in fast. "Raiders," Alex hissed under his breath. The comm system crackled. "Freighter Stellar Wind, power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." Alex's jaw tightened. He'd faced raiders before, and they weren't the kind to negotiate. He flipped a few switches, cutting power to the ship's main lights, leaving only dim emergency lighting. The raiders wouldn't be able to tell if he was compliant or planning a countermove. "Powering down now," Alex said, keeping his voice steady. In truth, he had no intention of giving up. He had a delivery to make, and more importantly, he had a reputation to protect. His clients knew him as the man who always delivered, no matter the odds. Losing the cargo wasn't just bad for business, it was unthinkable. The raiders' ships, sleek and predatory, loomed closer. Alex watched the radar, timing their approach. When they were within range, he slammed the throttle forward. The Stellar Wind roared to life, its thrusters burning hot as it darted between the asteroids. "Target is fleeing," one of the raiders shouted over the comm. "Intercept now." The chase was on. Alex weaved through the asteroid field with the precision of a surgeon, narrowly avoiding collisions. The raiders weren't as skilled, their ships taking minor hits from smaller rocks. One of the pursuers got too close to a large asteroid and was instantly obliterated in a fiery explosion. "2 down," Alex muttered, his hands moving instinctively over the controls. But the remaining raiders weren't giving up. A warning light blinked on his dashboard. His ship's shields were weakening. One more direct hit, and he'd be stranded. Thinking fast, Alex diverted power from non-essential systems to the shields and plotted a course through the densest part of the belt. "This is suicide," he told himself, but he didn't slow down. The Stellar Wind groaned as it squeezed through a narrow gap between 2 massive rocks. The raiders hesitated, giving Alex the precious seconds he needed. When he finally burst free of the asteroid belt, the stars opened up before him, clear and inviting. The raiders didn't follow. Their ships, built for speed rather than endurance, couldn't handle the stress of the belt for long. Alex allowed himself a brief moment of relief. "Still in one piece," he said, patting the console. "Good girl." But the danger wasn't over yet. His destination, North Station, was still a few hours away. The station was a massive intergalactic trade hub, home to all kinds of beings. Traders, smugglers, bounty hunters, and worse. Alex had dealt with shady characters before, but his current client, Tala Vrix, was in a league of her own. Tala was a high-ranking official in the Zenthlor Syndicate, a shadowy organization known for its ruthlessness. Alex didn't know what was in the crate he was transporting, and he didn't want to. All he knew was that it was valuable enough to risk his life for. By the time he docked at North Station, his nerves were frayed. The station was a sprawling structure of metal and glass, glowing faintly against the darkness of space. It was both a marvel of engineering and a monument to greed. Alex guided the Stellar Wind into a docking bay and powered down the engines. As he stepped out of the ship, a group of heavily armed Zenthlor guards was waiting for him. Tala Vrix stood at their center, tall and imposing. Her skin was a shimmering shade of gold, and her piercing violet eyes seemed to see straight through Alex. "You're late," Tala said, her voice cold and sharp. "Got held up," Alex replied, trying to keep his tone casual. Raiders in the asteroid belt. Tala raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. She gestured to the guards, who moved to inspect the crate. Alex watched as they scanned it with handheld devices, their expressions unreadable. Finally, Tala approached the crate herself. She placed a slender hand on its surface, her eyes narrowing. After a tense moment, she turned to Alex. "It's not enough," she said flatly. Alex frowned. "Not enough. That's what you ordered." Tala's lips curved into a cold smile. "Things have changed. You'll need to deliver more. And this time, you'll go to the coordinates I provide. No questions." Before Alex could protest, one of the guards handed him a datapad. The coordinates displayed on the screen sent a chill down his spine. The location was in uncharted space, a place no sane pilot would willingly go. "I don't have a choice, do I?" Alex said. Tala leaned in close, her voice a whisper. "No, you don't." As the guards began loading the crate into a Zenthar transport, Alex stood there, his mind racing. He didn't trust Tala, but he couldn't back out now. He had a reputation to uphold, and more importantly, he had a feeling that this job was bigger than he realized. As he returned to the stellar wind, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The datapad with the new coordinates felt heavy in his hand. Whatever lay ahead, Alex knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to be an ordinary delivery. Into the unknown. The stellar wind felt heavier than usual as Alex powered up the engines, the coordinates Tala had given him burning a hole in his mind. Uncharted space was no place for a cargo pilot, no matter how skilled. The datapad on his console blinked persistently, the ominous destination marked with a faint red glow. Coordinates locked, Alex murmured to himself, trying to ignore the creeping unease in his chest. The docking clamps released with a hiss, and the freighter lurched forward. As the station receded behind him, Alex let out a breath. This wasn't his first dangerous job, but something about this one felt different, like he wasn't just delivering cargo, but walking into a trap. Hours passed in silence, save for the occasional hum of the ship's systems. Alex stared at the coordinates on his navigation display, their destination marked in the heart of a blank sector. No star charts covered this area. No trade routes passed through. It was a void, unexplored and unwelcoming. "Why me?" Alex muttered. The question hung in the air, unanswered. A sudden ping interrupted his thoughts. The long-range sensors had picked up something. Another ship. Alex's stomach dropped. He tapped a few keys, trying to identify it, but the display returned only static. Whatever it was tailing him, and it wasn't broadcasting any ID. "Of course," Alex grumbled. Why would this be easy? He cut power to the main thrusters, letting the stellar wind drift silently. If they were tracking him, he'd need to see if they were hostile or just curious. Minutes passed, and the shadow of the other ship grew larger on his radar. They were closing in. The comm system crackled to life, and a deep, guttural voice filled the cockpit. "Freighter Stellar Wind, identify yourself." Alex hesitated. The voice was alien, rough, and commanding, but not Zenthar. Whoever this was, they weren't part of Tala's crew. "Alex Mercer, independent cargo pilot," he replied cautiously. "No trouble here, just passing through." Silence. Then the voice returned, colder this time. "Passing through. Nobody passes through here. Prepare to be boarded." Alex slammed the controls, reigniting the engines. "Not today," he muttered. The stellar wind surged forward, the unknown ship giving chase. Unlike the raiders from before, this vessel was faster and more advanced. It closed the distance effortlessly, firing warning shots that grazed Alex's shields. "Shields at 60%, the ship's AI announced calmly, as though Alex weren't moments from being vaporized. "Yeah, I noticed," Alex snapped, jerking the controls to the side. The freighter dove into the swirling currents of a nearby nebula, its dense gases scattering the sensors. The pursuing ship hesitated, giving Alex a small window to think. As he navigated deeper into the nebula, his comms buzzed again, but this time, the voice was different. It was quiet, almost a whisper. "Pilot Alex Mercer," it said, the tone smooth and eerily calm. "Your destination holds secrets not meant for you. Turn back." Alex froze. It wasn't a threat. It sounded like a warning, but it chilled him all the same. "Who is this?" he demanded, his voice steadier than he felt. No response. The channel went dead. Moments later, the nebula parted, and Alex gasped. Ahead of him was a ship unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was massive, its hull shimmering with colors that seemed to shift and ripple like liquid. It floated silently, its sheer size dwarfing the stellar wind. Before Alex could react, his systems went dark. The lights flickered, the hum of the engines faded, and the ship ground to a halt. Panic surged through him as he tried to reboot the systems, but nothing worked. Then a figure appeared on his main display, a tall, slender alien with deep violet skin and glowing white eyes. They stared at Alex, unblinking. "You carry something you do not understand," the alien said. "Your client is not who you think." Alex narrowed his eyes. "Who are you? What do you want?" The alien tilted their head slightly. "We are the Rithari, guardians of the old ways. The cargo you deliver is not just technology. It is a weapon that could destroy more than you realize." Alex's breath caught in his throat. He'd suspected the cargo was valuable, but this was beyond anything he'd imagined. The alien continued, their voice calm but firm. "Your next decision will determine the fate of more than just your people. Will you deliver destruction, or will you stop it?" Before Alex could respond, the display blinked off. The ship systems roared back to life, and the massive alien vessel disappeared as if it had never been there. Alex sat in stunned silence, his mind racing. Tala had lied to him. He was sure of it now. But what choice did he have? Refusing her wasn't an option, not without inviting her wrath. The coordinates on his navigation display flashed again, pulling him back to reality. The uncharted sector was still ahead, a yawning void that promised danger and answers. Alex clenched his fists. He didn't trust Tala, and he didn't trust the strange alien warning him to stop. But he did trust himself. "Guess we'll see who's telling the truth," Alex muttered, pushing the throttle forward. As the stellar wind entered the unknown, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Somewhere out there, the truth waited for him, and he wasn't sure he was ready to face it. The station's secrets. The stellar wind emerged from the warp jump into complete darkness. Alex squinted at his console, trying to make sense of the sensor readings. The star charts were blank, and the navigation system seemed to falter, as if it couldn't comprehend where he was. The only thing visible ahead was a faint, pulsating light. "That's it," Alex muttered, leaning forward in his chair. The coordinates Tala had given him pointed to the source of the light, a massive ancient structure that seemed to hang in space like a silent sentinel. The station was unlike anything Alex had seen before. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns that glowed faintly, shifting and twisting as if alive. It looked abandoned, yet it emanated a strange, almost magnetic pull. He guided the stellar wind closer, the silence in the cockpit oppressive. His ship's systems struggled to lock onto the station, as though it were cloaked in some kind of interference. When he finally aligned with a docking port, he hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back. Instead, he grabbed his blaster and a flashlight, securing the cargo bay before stepping into the airlock. The doors hissed open, and a rush of cold air greeted him. Alex shivered, stepping cautiously onto the station. The floor beneath him was metallic but soft, almost organic in texture. The docking bay was eerily empty. No ships, no signs of life. Just rows of towering arches that stretched into darkness. His flashlight beam flickered against the walls, illuminating strange carvings that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. "This place gives me the creeps," Alex muttered. He tapped his communicator. "Stellar wind, you're picking up anything?" The ship's A responded, its voice tinny. "Minimal readings, Captain Mercer. No detectable life forms, but significant energy signatures deeper inside." "Fantastic," Alex said, swallowing hard. As he moved through the station, the atmosphere grew heavier, almost as if the station itself were watching him. The corridors twisted unpredictably, defying any sense of logic or design. Symbols etched into the walls glowed faintly, casting eerie shadows that danced as he passed. Then he heard it, a faint hum, like distant machinery coming to life. Alex froze, his hand instinctively going to his blaster. The hum grew louder, accompanied by a rhythmic thudding, like a heartbeat. "Not creepy at all," Alex muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. He followed the sound, stepping into a vast chamber that made his breath catch. The walls shimmered like liquid metal, and in the center of the room floated a holographic figure. It was humanoid but clearly alien, with elongated limbs and a translucent body that seemed to ripple with energy. "Traveler," the figure said, its voice reverberating in Alex's chest. "You have brought the key." "The key?" Alex asked, his voice shaky. "I'm just a delivery guy. No idea what you're talking about." The hologram tilted its head, studying him. "The cargo you carry is not just technology. It is the heart of a weapon built to end wars, but capable of extinguishing entire civilizations." Alex's stomach churned. The warnings from the Rithari alien echoed in his mind. "What kind of weapon?" he demanded. "And why does Tala want it?" "Tala Vrix seeks to control the balance of power," the hologram replied. "But the Zenthar Syndicate does not understand what they possess. The key can create or it can destroy. It depends on the will of its wielder." Before Alex could ask more, the chamber shook violently. The hologram flickered, its image distorting. Alarms blared, and a mechanical voice boomed through the station in an unknown language. "What's happening?" Alex shouted, gripping the nearest wall to steady himself. The hologram's voice crackled. "Intruders. Zenthar forces are here. They must not take the key." Alex's heart raced. If Tala's people were here, he was running out of time. He had to decide: leave the cargo and save himself, or risk everything to uncover the truth. The walls of the chamber began to shift, sealing off exits as the station's defenses activated. Metallic drones emerged from hidden panels, their single, glowing eyes locking onto Alex. "Great," he muttered, drawing his blaster. He fired at the first drone, the shot ricocheting harmlessly off its surface. The drone retaliated, firing a beam of energy that narrowly missed Alex's head. He dove behind a console, his mind racing. "Stellar wind, emergency extraction protocol." He barked into his communicator. The ship's A responded, "Extraction in progress. Docking port compromised. Alternate route required." "Of course it is," Alex growled, peeking out to fire another shot. This time, he aimed for a weak spot where the drone's limbs connected. Sparks flew as the drone collapsed, but more were closing in. The hologram reappeared, flickering wildly. "Traveler, the cargo must be taken to the core. It is the only safe place." "Safe from who?" Alex yelled, rolling to avoid another energy blast. "From everyone," the hologram said. "The core will decide its fate." Before Alex could argue, a panel on the far wall slid open, revealing a narrow passageway. The hologram gestured toward it. "Go. Now." Alex didn't need to be told twice. He bolted for the passageway, his boots echoing against the strange metallic floor. The drones didn't follow, but the station continued to shake, as if it were on the verge of tearing itself apart. As he ran, Alex's mind raced. The cargo wasn't just a job anymore. It was something far bigger and far more dangerous. Tala wanted it. The Rithari had warned him about it. and now this ancient station was trying to protect it. What had he gotten himself into? When he finally emerged into another chamber, he gasped. At the center of the room was a glowing sphere, its surface swirling with colors that defied description. It pulsed faintly, like a living heartbeat. "The core," the hologram said, appearing beside him. "It awaits your decision." Alex stared at the sphere, his hand instinctively going to the cargo. This was it, the moment that could change everything. But what was he supposed to do? Before he could decide, a deafening explosion rocked the station, and the doors burst open. Xanthar soldiers flooded in, weapons drawn. Alex gritted his teeth, his heart pounding. He was out of time. Double cross. The explosion's shockwave sent Alex stumbling into the core chamber, his back hitting the wall with a painful thud. The force of the blast rattled his teeth, but he barely had time to recover. In a split second, he was back on his feet, drawing his blaster. The Xanthar soldiers stormed in, their heavy boots echoing through the narrow corridors as they poured into the chamber. "Freeze!" one of the soldiers shouted, aiming his weapon directly at Alex. Alex's eyes flicked to the glowing sphere in the center of the room, the core. He couldn't let them get their hands on it. The Rithari had said it would decide the fate of more than just humanity. If Tala wanted it, there was no telling what she planned to do with it. Or worse, what her syndicate might do if they got control. The blaster in his hand felt like a lifeline. But it was useless against the well-equipped Xanthar soldiers who now surrounded him. They were professionals, trained to deal with every kind of threat. "Step away from the core, human," a voice rang out, cold and commanding. It was Tala's voice. Alex's heart sank as she appeared from the shadows at the far side of the room. She looked every bit as composed as she had when he first met her. Tall, cold-eyed, her golden skin almost glowing in the low light. But the smile she wore now wasn't the one of a businesswoman. It was something far darker. "You," Alex growled, his grip tightening on his blaster. He'd suspected something was off, but seeing her in person now, surrounded by her men, it all made sense. Tala had played him from the start. "I see you've been doing some thinking, Mercer," she said smoothly, her eyes flicking to the core. "But now, you've reached the point where all your questions will be answered. Unfortunately, you won't like the answers. You lied to me," Alex said through gritted teeth. "What is this thing? What do you want with it?" Tala's smile widened. She took a step forward, and the soldiers instinctively moved aside, clearing the way for her. "This," she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction, "is the key to a new era. The weapon inside it can tear down entire star systems or rebuild them. I intend to control it. All of it." Alex's eyes burned with anger, but the more she spoke, the more he realized the magnitude of what was happening. Tala had known all along that this was no ordinary cargo. It was a weapon. Not just any weapon, but a force that could reshape the universe itself. "Why didn't you just tell me?" Alex demanded. "Why go through all this? You could have told me from the start. Would you have done the job if you knew the truth?" Tala asked, her voice as cold as ice. "No, you're too loyal to your people, but you'll understand soon enough." She turned her gaze back to the core. "And I'll be the one to unlock its potential." Alex's mind raced. There was no way he could let her have this kind of power. Not if the Xanthar had any say in it. This wasn't just about a delivery anymore. It was about stopping something that could tear apart entire civilizations. Tala raised her hand, and her soldiers moved to close the distance between them. Alex could feel the walls closing in. He glanced quickly at the soldiers. Some had weapons trained on him. Others were focused on the core. The core, that was his only hope. If it really could decide the fate of the universe, then he needed to make sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands. Without thinking, Alex dropped to the ground, rolling toward the base of the glowing sphere. His hand scrambled for something, anything, that would allow him to gain control. "Get him," Tala shouted. But Alex didn't need to fight them all at once. He had a plan, As he reached the core, his hand landed on a strange interface built into its surface. He could feel a pulse of energy from the core, like it was alive. It was unlike anything he'd ever experienced before, an overwhelming alien presence that seemed to speak directly to his mind. Alex took a deep breath, pushing away the fear gnawing at him. This was his only chance. With a few swift motions, he activated the interface. The energy from the core surged into his body, overwhelming him with visions of stars exploding, planets being consumed by fire, and civilizations crumbling under the weight of a terrible, unimaginable power. The soldiers hesitated. They could see the change in the room. The atmosphere itself seemed to shift, becoming heavier, charged with an unknown force. Tala's eyes widened in shock. "What are you doing?" "Stop." But Alex couldn't stop. He had no choice. The core was beginning to react to him, as though it recognized him. His pulse quickened, his fingers trembling as they flew over the interface. Tala's voice cut through his concentration. "You don't understand," she said, her voice a blend of rage and desperation. "You can't control it. It will consume you." But Alex wasn't listening anymore. The core had shown him something, a way to stop the destruction without using the weapon. He had the key now, not just to its power, but to its purpose. This wasn't a tool to be wielded by any one person. It was a relic of an ancient race, meant to restore balance, not to tip it into chaos. The core pulsed again, brighter this time, and Alex felt the pressure in his chest ease. He knew what had to be done. With a final push, Alex locked the interface into place, sending a wave of energy through the station. The walls trembled as the energy surged outward. Tala's soldiers staggered back, shielding their faces as the room filled with blinding light. "No!" Tala screamed, but it was too late. The core's power didn't explode in violence, as Alex feared. Instead, it focused inward, absorbing the destructive energy within it, draining it until the room was filled with a quiet hum. The core's glow dimmed, no longer a threat. When the light finally faded, Alex stood there, gasping for breath. Tala was staring at him, her face pale, her eyes wide with fury. "What have you done?" she hissed. Alex met her gaze without flinching. "I stopped you." The soldiers around them were in disarray, unsure of what had just happened. The once threatening energy of the core was gone, absorbed, and neutralized. Alex knew this wasn't over. Tala wouldn't give up so easily. But for now, the weapon was neutralized. He had no idea how long that would last. "Get up," he said to Tala, as she remained on her knees. "You're going to tell me everything. No more secrets." A desperate gamble. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the core, which now pulsed in a steady rhythm, as if it had calmed down after the storm of energy that had surged through it. Alex stood over Tala, his blaster still raised. The Zenthar soldiers were motionless, eyes flicking from him to the core, unsure of what to do next. Tala glared up at him, her golden skin flushed with anger, her violet eyes burning with hatred. "You think you've won," she hissed. "You've only delayed the inevitable." Alex's grip on his blaster tightened, but he didn't fire. He wasn't here to kill her. Not yet, anyway. He needed answers. This wasn't just about stopping Tala. This was about stopping whatever nightmare had been unleashed by the core. "You're wrong," Alex said calmly. "I stopped you." Tala's expression twisted with fury, but she said nothing. Instead, she slowly stood up, her posture stiff, as if trying to regain some semblance of dignity. The soldiers surrounding her still didn't move. They were waiting for orders, unsure of what had just happened. Alex wasn't sure what he was hoping for. He'd seen how ruthless Tala could be, how calculating and manipulative. But something about the situation felt different now. The core wasn't just a weapon. It was a key to something far greater, and Tala's obsession with it had clouded everything. "Tell me everything," Alex demanded, his voice low and steady. "How did you know about the core? Why did you want it?" Tala took a step back, her eyes flicking to her men. One of the soldiers shifted, as if preparing to act, but Tala gave him a subtle signal to hold back. She wasn't afraid, not yet. The core, Tala began, her voice cold, was never just about power. It's something much more ancient, a creation of the Itheri, an alien race that existed long before any of us. They didn't build it to conquer. They built it to protect. But as time passed, the knowledge of its purpose was lost, and so was its true power. Alex's brows furrowed in confusion. Protect? From what? Tala's lips curled into a small, bitter smile. From the Rithari. The Rithari are a group of ancient beings, bound to the will of the core. They were once the guardians of the galaxy, but they became corrupted, parasitic. They feed off destruction, growing stronger with every war, every conflict. The Rithari are the reason civilizations rise and fall. And they know the core can stop them, but they cannot take control of it. They need a willing mind to unlock its full potential. So they want someone like you, Alex said, piecing things together. Someone willing to risk everything for control of the weapon. Tala nodded, her gaze unwavering. Exactly. And that's where you come in, Mercer. Alex's mind raced. Tala had known more than she'd let on. She'd been using him. No, manipulating him. Since the beginning. The job had never been just about delivering cargo. He'd been a pawn in her plan to gain control of the core. He stepped closer to her. You tried to use me to unlock the core's power. You never intended to stop the Rithari, did you? You wanted to use their weapon to dominate. Tala's expression shifted, a flash of something that could have been regret, but it was gone too quickly. You don't understand, she said, her voice quiet now. The Rithari must be stopped, but they're too powerful. I was going to use the core to destroy them, control it, and turn the weapon on them before they wiped us all out. Alex shook his head, disbelief still clouding his thoughts. And you think you can control something like that? You can't. No one can. The core isn't a tool, Tala. It's a force that chooses its wielder. You've only seen part of it. Tala's face darkened. You think you're the only one who can understand it. You're wrong. I've spent years studying the ancient texts. I know more about the core than you could ever hope to. I was willing to sacrifice everything to unlock its full potential. And now you've ruined it. Alex's eyes locked onto hers, a new resolve hardening in his chest. It's not ruined, but it's not yours to control either. He turned away from her, his gaze shifting back to the core. The soft glow from its surface seemed to call to him, not with force, but with a quiet invitation. It wasn't offering destruction. It wasn't offering control. It was waiting. Stellar wind, Alex said, his voice resolute. Get me out of here. The ship's eye responded, its tone crisp, coordinates set, proceeding with extraction. Alex didn't wait to hear more. He didn't have time to. The Zenthar soldiers hadn't moved, but they were still a threat. Tala was still a threat. He couldn't trust anyone anymore, not even Mir. But as he reached the docking bay, a voice rang out behind him. Mercer. Tala shouted, her voice breaking through the tension of the moment. You can't just walk away from this. You need to understand what's at stake. We're at war with the Rithari, don't you see? You have to join me. Alex paused, his hand on the door to the ship. He looked back, his heart heavy with the weight of what he was about to say. He had no time for speeches, no time to explain his choice. He only had time to act. I'm not your pawn, Tala, he said, his voice hard and unwavering. I'll stop the Rithari, but not your way. I'll find another way, one that doesn't end with the destruction of everything. Tala's eyes narrowed as Alex stepped into the airlock, sealing the door behind him. He turned back to the cockpit, fingers already moving across the controls, setting course for the unknown. The stellar wind lifted off, the docking bay doors opening into the darkness of space. He wasn't done yet. He had a long way to go before he could stop the Rithari, but he wasn't doing it her way. He wasn't letting anyone else decide the fate of the galaxy. Not anymore. The Syndicate's wrath. The stellar wind blasted through the emptiness of space, a streak of light amidst the void. Alex Mercer's fingers danced over the controls, the ship's eye humming in the background, as he set course for a distant rendezvous. The core was still a mystery, its true power yet to be fully understood, and the words of the Rithari and Tala echoed in his mind. He had no answers, just more questions. He'd made his choice. He wasn't going to let Tala control the core. But now the question loomed larger than ever. What was he supposed to do with it? If Tala's desire for control was bad, how much worse would the Rithari be? What if they were right, and this power needed to be sealed away forever? Suddenly, the comms system crackled to life. The AI's voice cut through his thoughts. "Captain Mercer, I'm detecting multiple ships on an intercept course." Alex's gut tightened. He didn't need to look at the readouts to know who it was. The Zenthar Syndicate was here, and they were bringing the full force of their fleet to finish what they'd started. Great, Alex muttered under his breath, his mind racing. He'd expected retaliation, but not this quickly. His hand hovered over the comms panel, but he knew better than to try and negotiate with them. Tala's obsession with the core meant that no amount of pleading, bargaining, or bribery would get him out of this one. The AI continued. "2 Zenthar warships have launched, Captain. We don't have much time." Alex's fingers tightened around the throttle as he veered the stellar wind into a sharp turn, the ship's hull groaning under the sudden shift. He needed to think quickly. The stellar wind wasn't fast enough to outrun them, and their firepower was too much for him to outgun directly. "Can you access the station's weapon systems?" Alex asked, a sudden thought forming. The AI paused, calculating. "Unable to interface with external systems without direct connection, Captain." "Damn," Alex muttered. The station was ancient. There was no chance it had the kind of remote access he needed. He needed to think like a pilot, not a warrior. He needed an escape route. The radar blinked red, a large signature closing in fast. "Time to make this interesting," Alex said grimly. He flicked a switch, engaging the ship's cloaking system. For a brief moment, the stellar wind shimmered and vanished from the radar, hidden in the vastness of space. The sensors had a narrow window of time before they recalibrated, but that was all Alex needed. The Zenthar ships were powerful, but they were bulky and slow. He could lose them with a clever maneuver. He dove toward the nearest asteroid field, pulling the stellar wind into a series of sharp turns, weaving between rocks. His hands flew over the controls, pushing the ship to its limits. Every muscle in his body tensed as he fought to keep the freighter stable while navigating the deadly maze of rocks. The Zenthar ships had already begun to lock onto him, but their sensors weren't good enough to detect him yet. He was staying out of their line of sight, taking the ship into a series of unpredictable paths. He wasn't thinking about the warships. He wasn't thinking about Tala or the Rithari. Right now, it was just him and the ship, and the need to survive. Minutes dragged on, but Alex's pulse was steady, his mind clear despite the intense pressure. The Zenthar ships were still on his tail, firing blind shots into the asteroid field, hoping to flush him out. But he knew these rocks better than they did. The more they fired, the more they slowed down, their fuel reserves draining quickly. Another transmission broke through his concentration. "Mercer, you can't hide forever." It was Tala. Her voice was calm, too calm, but Alex could hear the barely contained fury beneath the surface. "You're wasting your time." Alex shot back, his eyes narrowing. "You've lost. There's nothing you can do to stop me." Tala's response was laced with venom. "You think this is over? You've made a grave mistake. The Rithari will come for you. And when they do, there will be no place left to hide." Alex's fingers tightened around the controls, his grip unwavering. "Then let them come. I'm done with you." Before Tala could respond, Alex hit the thrusters and shot the stellar wind into a full burn, zooming ahead into the deeper asteroid field. The Zenthar ships were falling behind, their pursuit growing weaker. They weren't built for the kind of maneuvering Alex was doing. They'd be forced to retreat soon, or they'd risk total destruction. But just as he thought he'd lost them, the sensors flashed an alert. "Captain, incoming fire." A missile streaked toward him from behind. The Zenthar had called in reinforcements. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He didn't have time to dodge. He couldn't outrun it. With a quick decision, Alex pushed the ship into a sudden roll, flipping the stellar wind 180 degrees. The missile, locked on his previous trajectory, veered off course but exploded in a fiery burst of energy. The shockwave rattled the ship, but the hull held steady. "Nice try," Alex muttered, his hand still gripping the controls. But they wouldn't stop now. They'd throw everything they had at him. And then it happened. A massive cloaked ship appeared out of nowhere, its massive shadow eclipsing the stars. Alex barely had time to register its size before it released a barrage of energy weapons. The Zenthar ships were caught in the blast, their shields collapsing under the overwhelming firepower. The explosion sent shockwaves through the asteroid field, disintegrating several nearby asteroids in the process. Alex's breath caught in his throat. The ship that had just intervened was no ordinary vessel. It was one of the Rithari, the ancient guardians, just as the hologram had warned him. "We've come for the core," a voice echoed through the ship's comm system. The voice was deep and resonant, almost otherworldly. "And we are not here to negotiate." The radar went dead, the faint energy signature of the Zenthar ships fading into nothing. Alex gritted his teeth, his mind racing. The Rithari had found him, and they weren't here for a friendly chat. "Great," Alex muttered. "Just what I needed." The ship's voice continued, calm and menacing. "You hold what is ours, and now you will return it, or else." Alex tightened his grip on the controls. The war was about to take a turn he wasn't ready for. Humanity's triumph. The Rithari ship loomed in front of Alex, its massive presence blocking out the stars. The cold, resonant voice from earlier echoed again through the comms. "You will surrender the core. Resistance is futile." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He had expected trouble, but not this. The Rithari weren't just any alien force. They were the ancient guardians of power, and they'd clearly been watching him. The core wasn't just a weapon. It was part of something much bigger, something he couldn't even begin to comprehend. And now they were demanding it back. The stellar wind shuddered as Alex engaged the ship's engines to full throttle, pushing it into evasive maneuvers. His mind was racing. He didn't know how he'd gotten into this mess, but he sure as hell wasn't going to give up now. "Stellar wind, evasive pattern Delta 5. He barked into the comms, and the ship's AI complied instantly, throwing the vessel into a series of dizzying spins and sharp turns that would test its old engines to the limit. The Rithari ship didn't chase directly, however. It seemed to be assessing him, its movements deliberate and controlled. They were waiting for him to make the first mistake. "I don't want to fight you," Alex shouted through gritted teeth, trying to steady the ship. He knew he was stalling for time, hoping for a miracle. "I don't even know what the core is, what it can do, but I'm not handing it over to you without a damn good reason." The voice responded, now laced with a trace of something like impatience. "You are not the first human to come into contact with the core. You will not be the last. Return it to us, and we will ensure your survival. Resist, and you will be eradicated, along with everything you hold dear." The threat was chilling, but it didn't break Alex's resolve. If the Rithari were truly as old and powerful as they claimed, then they had no idea what humanity could do when cornered. He tapped into the ship's internal systems, bypassing some of the more restrictive protocols. If he couldn't outrun them, he could at least throw them off course. The Rithari weren't used to unpredictable tactics. They were ancient, and their technology was beyond anything humanity had developed. But Alex had something they didn't: human ingenuity. "Stellar wind," he muttered. "Let's do something they won't expect." The ship's AI hummed in acknowledgement, and Alex felt the familiar hum of the engines as the stellar wind suddenly accelerated in a sharp curve, moving directly toward the massive Rithuri ship. The alien vessel wasn't expecting this. Its sensors had locked onto him, anticipating his attempt to flee. Alex was playing a dangerous game, but it was the only card he had left. The distance between the ships closed in a heartbeat. The Rithuri ship fired. Bright streams of energy shot toward him, but Alex had already engaged the stellar wind's emergency cloaking system. "Now," Alex whispered, pressing the activation button. For a brief moment, the stellar wind flickered out of existence, shrouded in near-perfect invisibility. The Rithuri weapons sliced through empty space where he had been just seconds ago. The stellar wind shot out from beneath the cloak, emerging directly under the Rithuri ship. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he switched to manual controls, aiming directly for the engine block of the massive vessel. He pulled the trigger. The ship's guns fired in rapid succession, narrowly missing the delicate underbelly of the Rithuri ship. But Alex's shot hit its mark, just barely. The energy blast struck a weak point in the outer hull, sending a ripple of energy through the alien ship's systems. The ship reeled as its defenses flickered and sputtered, allowing Alex's shot to breach the outer layer and disable its engines momentarily. The Rithuri ship drifted for a brief moment, vulnerable. "Now or never," Alex muttered, his hand steady despite the chaos. With the Rithuri ship temporarily disabled, Alex didn't hesitate. He activated a series of specialized drones from the stellar wind, launching them toward the massive vessel. The drones latched onto the hull with magnetic claws, sending pulses of disruptive energy into the alien ship's power core. It wasn't enough to destroy the ship. It was just a distraction, something to buy him time. The comms crackled again, but this time, the voice from the Rithuri ship sounded strained, almost desperate. "You cannot defeat us. You do not understand the power you wield. You are playing a dangerous game." Alex's breath caught in his throat. For a brief second, he thought the alien might break through and take control again. But that wasn't going to happen. Not while he still had a shot at winning. "This game isn't over," Alex said, eyes locked on the fading shadows of the Rithuri ship. "And I'm not playing by your rules anymore." With the Rithuri temporarily stalled, Alex had one last card to play. He turned the stellar wind toward the nearby planet, an uninhabited world in a distant system, and punched the coordinates into the ship's navigation system. The Rithuri ship began to regain power. Alex could feel the seconds counting down. His ship had no chance in a head-to-head battle. It was time for the final move. He learned something about the core when he interacted with it earlier. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a decision-making process, a force that thrived on balance. If he could expose it to the right environment, the core would react in ways that could help tip the scales back in his favor. "Stellar wind," Alex whispered. "Bring us home." The stellar wind rocketed toward the planet's atmosphere, straight toward a massive, previously hidden facility buried beneath miles of rock. It was a relic of humanity's past, a secret project built long ago, a defense system powered by the very same ancient technology that had been used to create the core. It was humanity's last line of defense. As Alex activated the facility's systems, a surge of energy flowed through the ship, blending with the power of the core itself. The ground below shook as the facility's weapons came online, aimed directly at the Rithuri ship. The core hummed with energy, sending out a pulse of neutralizing force that crippled the alien vessel's systems. The Rithuri ship's energy output began to flicker and die, its once imposing form now helpless against the combined power of human innovation and the core's delicate balance. Alex's heart raced as the Rithuri ship struggled to regain power, but it was too late. The stellar wind dropped low over the facility, its weapons still active, keeping the alien ship at bay. The voice over the comms sounded faint now, weaker. "This is not over, human. You cannot escape what is coming." Alex paused, watching as the ship drifted into space, powerless. "It's over now," he said, his voice steady. "You've lost." As the Rithari ship drifted away into the dark, Alex took a long, deep breath. The core had done its part, its power having helped neutralize the alien threat. The war wasn't won yet, but it was a start. Humanity had taken its first step into the stars, not as a conqueror, but as a force for balance. He'd delivered more than just a package this time. He'd delivered hope.